In the quiet suburbs of Ravenwood, Illinois, life moved at a gentle pace. Neighbors waved, coffee shops opened early, and the air always smelled of new beginnings. Among the people who called Ravenwood home was Eric Miller, a man in his early 30s with a simple dream: to build a family with the woman he loved. Eric wasn't rich, but he was the kind of man everyone respected. He worked long hours as an electrical engineer at a small firm, never complained, and always found time to help people, whether it was fixing a neighbor's porch light or volunteering at the community center on weekends. To everyone, he was genuine. To Janet Brooks, he was everything she thought she needed. Eric met Janet 2 years earlier at a friend's engagement party. She had the kind of beauty that didn't shout, soft-spoken, graceful, and effortlessly magnetic. He was shy at first, but his sincerity caught her attention. One date turned into two turned into countless late-night calls, laughter, and promises. Eric had never been in love like this before. "You're the reason I believe in good things again," he told her one night as they sat watching the stars from his truck bed. "You're too sweet, Eric," she smiled. "You deserve the world." And that's exactly what he wanted to give her. Within months, Eric was already saving up for an engagement ring. He worked extra shifts, skipped nights out with friends, and spent every dollar wisely. When he finally proposed on her birthday, surrounded by friends, candles, and music, Janet cried to everyone. It was a perfect love story. But behind her tears, there was something else. Something Eric couldn't see. Janet loved Eric, yes, but not like he loved her. Her love was cautious, tired, and bruised by the past. Before Eric, there was Richard Hale, a man she thought she'd spend forever with. Richard was charming, ambitious, and dangerously unpredictable. He could make her laugh one moment and break her heart the next. For 2 years, their relationship was a storm, passion mixed with pain, love tangled with control. When she finally left him, she swore she'd never look back. Eric had been her healing, the calm after a hurricane. But sometimes, ghosts don't stay buried. One evening, about 3 months before the wedding, Janet received a text from an unknown number. "You still look beautiful, Janet." She froze. Her heart raced. That voice in her head whispered a name she didn't want to hear: Richard. She hesitated before replying. "What do you want?" "Just closure," he said. "No drama. Just talk." She ignored him, deleted the message. But over the next few days, they kept coming, soft, taunting, almost harmless messages that slowly chipped at her peace. Finally, she gave in. "Fine. One conversation. That's it." They met at the Copper Lounge, a quiet bar just outside town. It was almost empty when she walked in, just soft jazz and dim lights. Richard was already there, sitting by the window, that same confident smirk on his face. "You came," he said, standing up. "5 minutes, Richard," Janet replied coldly. "Say whatever you want, and let's end this." He smiled. "Relax. I'm not here to ruin anything. I just wanted to see how you're doing." She sat down, folded her arms. "You shouldn't be contacting me. I'm getting married." "I know," he said. "To Eric Miller. The perfect man. The man who probably still opens your car door and brings you breakfast in bed." She frowned. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I wanted to look you in the eye and ask one question." "What?" "Do you ever think about me?" Janet stayed silent. Her heart pounded. "Don't lie," Richard said softly. "You left, but I know you. You don't just stop feeling overnight." She looked away, fighting the flood of emotions she didn't want to feel. Memories came rushing back, the nights, the laughter, the chaos, the pain. "You hurt me, Richard," she whispered. "And you hurt me too," he said. "Maybe that's why I can't let go." The silence between them grew heavy. The world outside the window blurred. 1 hour turned into 2. The bitterness melted into nostalgia. When she finally stood to leave, he reached for her hand. "One last hug," he said quietly. For old time's sake. It should have ended there. But it didn't. Later that night, Janet sat in her car, parked behind the same lounge, her hands trembling around the steering wheel. Her lipstick was smeared, her eyes red. She had made the one mistake she promised herself she never would. She slept with him. "Oh God, what have I done?" she whispered to herself. The next morning, she walked into Eric's kitchen pretending everything was normal. Eric, cheerful as ever, turned from the stove, smiling. "Morning, beautiful. I made your favorite, blueberry pancakes." "You didn't have to," she said softly. "Of course I did," he replied. "You've been so stressed. About the wedding. I just want you happy." She looked at him, this man who loved her without question, and felt the sharp sting of guilt. "You're too good to me, Eric." "That's what love is," he said, kissing her forehead. She smiled, but her heart was breaking, and the days that followed, Janet tried to bury the guilt under layers of routine. She kept busy, florist appointments, venue calls, dress fittings. Everyone around her saw a glowing bride-to-be. But every time she looked at her phone, there it was again, Richard's name. "I can't stop thinking about that night," he texted. "Please. Don't do this," she replied. "Why not? You didn't seem to mind then." Her hands shook as she deleted each message. But what she didn't know was that Richard had already started planning something darker. He didn't love her. He never did. He only wanted payback for the days she walked away from him without looking back. Oh, Richard, this was poetic. She left him humiliated years ago. Now, he'd make sure her new life burned before it even began. And while Janet stood in front of the mirror, trying on her white gown and smiling for pictures, she didn't see what was coming. She thought she had buried her past. But Richard Hale was digging it up, piece by piece. And when he was done, he wouldn't just break her heart. He would destroy everything she had built with Eric. 2 weeks to the wedding. Everything seemed perfect on the outside. The venue was booked, the invitation sent, and the final fittings were done. Janet smiled for every camera, laughed at every rehearsal, and said all the right words, but inside she was falling apart. She had been feeling strange lately, dizzy spells, morning fatigue, a growing sense that something wasn't right. First, she blamed the stress. Planning a wedding could exhaust anyone. But when she skipped her period, a cold realization crept in. One morning, before dawn, Janet quietly slipped out of bed and drove to a 24-hour pharmacy. The roads were empty, and the world was still half asleep. She parked her car outside and sat there for almost 10 minutes, just staring at the glowing sign that read "Open." Her hands trembled as she walked in and bought the test. She didn't even wait to get home. She went straight into the restroom. Minutes later, her world shattered. 2 bold pink lines stared back at her. Positive. Her knees weakened. She sank to the floor, her heart pounding. "No, no, no," she whispered, shaking her head. "This can't be happening." Tears blurred her vision. Her wedding was in 2 weeks. Everyone was expecting a happy ending. But the truth hit her like a slap. It couldn't be. Eric's had only been one night with Richard. One stupid, regrettable night. And now it had come back to destroy her. That morning, she couldn't focus. Eric was humming happily in the kitchen, flipping pancakes as he always did. He talked about honeymoon destinations, about starting a family someday. Every word cut deeper. When he mentioned wanting a child someday, she almost broke. "Maybe we'll be lucky," Eric smiled, not knowing the irony in his words. "Maybe we'll have a little one right after the wedding." Janet forced a laugh, but her stomach turned. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not ever. There was only one person who needed to know Richard. She met him that evening at his apartment, far from Ravenwood, where no one would recognize her. Richard looked surprised when he saw her at the door. "Janet." "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. He smirked. "You look pale. What's wrong?" "Cold feet before the wedding." "I'm pregnant, Richard." The smile vanished from his face. For a second, he just stared, processing. Then he laughed softly, not with joy, but disbelief. You're serious? Yes. And it's yours, she said, tears filling her eyes. It has to be. Richard leaned back on the couch, running his tongue over his teeth. Well, that's poetic, isn't it? This isn't funny, she snapped. You don't understand what this means. My wedding is in 2 weeks. I understand perfectly, he said calmly. You're marrying another man while carrying my child. Her voice cracked. Please, Richard. You can't tell anyone. I'm begging you. He leaned forward slowly. And what do I get in return? She looked confused. What? You left me, remember? He said, smiling faintly. You walked out of my life like I didn't matter. Now suddenly, you want me to protect you. Richard, please, don't do this. I made a mistake. I just need you to stay quiet. I'll find a way to fix this. He studied her, the desperation in her eyes, the trembling in her voice. Then he stood up and walked closer. You know, he said softly, you always thought you were smarter than me. But look at you now, begging for help from the man you betrayed. She looked away, ashamed. I'll tell Eric it's his, she whispered. He'll never question it. We've been close lately. He'll believe it. So you'll lie to him for the rest of your life? If that's what it takes. He nodded slowly, pretending to think. Then he said, Fine. I'll keep your little secret. Janet exhaled in relief, wiping her tears. Thank you. But the smile that spread across Richard's face wasn't forgiveness. It was satisfaction, cold and calculated. Don't thank me yet, he said. I just hope you're ready to live with it. That night, Janet drove home feeling like a ghost. Eric noticed something was off, but he didn't push. You okay? He asked. Just tired, she said. You've been acting strange lately. I thought maybe you're nervous about the wedding. I'm fine, she whispered. He kissed her forehead and smiled, completely unaware that the woman beside him was living a lie. Meanwhile, Richard's agreement wasn't really an agreement. It was the first move in a new game. Began collecting evidence, took photos of the pregnancy test Janet left in his bathroom trash can. He saved every text, every word she'd written begging him to stay silent, even made a secret voice recording of their last conversation, her trembling voice saying, It's yours, Richard. Please don't tell anyone. To him, this was art. The perfect setup for revenge. He didn't plan to expose her right away. No, that would be too simple. He wanted her to believe everything was safe, to walk down the aisle thinking her secret was buried forever. Then, when she least expected it, he'd tear her world apart in front of everyone. As the days passed, Janet tried to convince herself everything was under control. She went to doctor appointments in secret, changed her diet, and told Eric she just needed to rest more before the wedding night. She would sit alone, staring at her reflection in the mirror, whispering, It's okay. No one will ever know. But deep down she felt it, the weight of guilt growing with every heartbeat inside her. Sometimes she thought about coming clean to Eric. She imagined his face, the heartbreak, the disappointment. She couldn't do it, and so she kept lying. She smiled during the wedding rehearsals. She took pictures with her bridesmaids. She posted #counting down to forever on social media. Everyone, she was glowing. But inside she was breaking. Meanwhile, Richard watched from a distance. Patient, calculating, and cruel. He attended none of the pre-wedding events, but he knew everything that was happening. He'd even befriended one of Janet's vendors, pretending to be a friend helping with logistics, just to gather more details. Every photo she posted, every caption about true love, he saved them all, like pieces of evidence for a final exhibit. Oh, him, it wasn't just revenge anymore. It was justice twisted by ego. He wanted the whole world to see that the perfect bride wasn't perfect at all. The morning of the wedding felt like a dream. The sky over Ravenwood was clear, the sun warm, and the chapel was wrapped in white flowers and soft piano music. Guests filled the seats, smiling and whispering about how perfect the couple looked together. Eric stood at the altar, beaming, nervous, but glowing with pride. He waited for this moment his entire life. The moment he'd called Janet his wife, he looked sharp in his navy blue tuxedo, adjusting his tie as his best man teased him. "You ready, man?" "More than ready," Eric said, smiling. "She's everything I ever wanted." Everyone who knew him could see the joy in his eyes. But only Janet knew the fear in hers. Inside the bridal room, Janet sat before a mirror, her makeup flawless, her dress perfect, but her hands trembled. The artist fixing her veil smiled softly. "You look beautiful, ma'am." "He's a lucky man." Janet forced a smile. Lucky. That word hit her like a knife. She had barely slept in days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Richard's face, his smirk, his promise to keep the secret. 2 weeks had passed since she told him about the pregnancy. He agreed to stay quiet, even said, "Don't worry, Janet. I want you to be happy, really." But deep down, she knew Richard. He was never the kind to forgive, only to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Still, she prayed. She prayed he wouldn't come. When the music began, the doors opened, and everyone stood. Janet walked down the aisle slowly, every step heavier than the last. Her father held her hand, but she felt cold inside. Eric's eyes lit up when he saw her. Oh, him. She was everything pure and perfect. "You look breathtaking," he whispered when she reached him. "Thank you," she whispered back, forcing a smile. The ceremony began. The priest spoke of love, trust, and forever. Each word felt like a test she couldn't pass. Then came the moment. "If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now, or forever hold your peace." The hall fell silent. Janet held her breath. For a second she thought it was over, that she'd made it through. But then the doors opened. All eyes turned. A tall man in a dark suit stepped in, confident, calm, and smiling. He was Richard Hale. The crowd whispered, confused. Janet froze. Her bouquet slipped slightly in her trembling hands. Richard walked down the aisle slowly, his shoes echoing against the marble floor. His eyes locked on Janet's the entire time. Eric frowned, puzzled. "Who is this?" he whispered to her. Janet couldn't answer. Richard stopped a few feet from them, smiled at Eric, and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Eric. You're a lucky man." Eric hesitated but shook his hand politely. "Thanks. I don't think we've met." Richard nodded, smirking. "No, but I've heard so much about you." He turned toward Janet, his voice calm but sharp, and about her. The guests began murmuring. The priest looked uneasy. Richard reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. "I didn't come here to ruin your day," he said, his voice steady. "I just think you deserve to know the truth before you marry her." He opened the envelope and dropped its contents onto the altar floor, a folded paper, a few printed messages, and a photograph. Eric stared, confused. Richard bent down, picked one up and held it out. "This," he said softly, "is the pregnancy test she took 2 weeks ago." The room went dead silent. "And these," he continued, showing the text messages, "are her messages to me, the father of that child." Gasps filled the hall. A few people covered their mouths in shock. That Eric's face went pale. What are you talking about?" Richard looked him straight in the eye. "Before you marry her, Eric, you should know the child she's carrying isn't yours." He turned slightly, his tone colder now. "It's mine." The hall erupted, whispers, gasps, phones lifted in disbelief. Janet burst into tears, trying to speak, but no words came. Eric stepped back, staring at her like she was a stranger. "Janet, tell me he's lying." "Eric, please. I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been lying to me. That our wedding was built on a lie." She reached for him, but he pulled away. Richard smiled faintly, satisfied. His revenge was complete. As Janet collapsed, sobbing, Eric turned and walked out of the church, leaving behind the vows, the ring, and the woman he thought he knew. And Richard? He simply walked out after him, whispering to himself, "Now we're even."